by being in a sacred union relationship, your impact, your contribution is contributing to the energetic soup with more love, more integration of those masculine, feminine poles.
Today's episode is a really special one for many reasons, and one of them being that this is the first time that I have two guests in one same episode, Christine Hassler and Stefanos Sifandos. And if you haven't met them before or heard about their work, Christine is a master coach, keynote speaker, best-selling author of the book Expectation Hangover, and the host of the podcast Over It and On With It. And Steph is a master coach specialized in men's work, relationship coaching, feminine and masculine dynamics, and sacred sexuality. So within this episode, we firstly dive into what sacred union is and what it is not. Then we go into really understanding what we get to be within ourselves, how we get to prepare ourselves if we want to attract a sacred union relationship, or if we want to bring sacred union to our existing relationship. And in that, the question was brought of, can we cultivate sacred union in our existing relationship? Or is this something that either you know from the beginning or it's just not it? We also go into the different things that may come up when we are in sacred union, because we're doing the work, because we're going deeper, because we're saying yes, and how to work towards learning to repair and learning to create certain relationship agreements and ways of being in relationships in the good times and the challenging times, so that we can really show up for this sacred union concept. We also talk about some of the challenges that Christine and Steph had to face and are facing within their relationship, and how they navigate those in the most conscious, mature, and loving, compassionate, safe, inclusive way possible. So I hope that you get as much value from this as we did, and keep on listening as we dive right into it. Christine and Steph, thank you so much for making the time to be here again. I'm really excited to have you finally together. I've had you both individually in the show, but it's really great to be seeing you both and having this conversation with you both together at this time.
Oh, happy to be here.
Yeah. So as I was sharing with you before we pressed recording, this is a conversation that's been really relevant, something that I have been wanting to hear more about and listening to all these different podcasts on. The majority of them with you, actually, guys. So this is why I've reached out to you about it. And I know that it's a conversation that a lot of people are wanting to have, but also having a lot of questions around. Because when we hear the concept of sacred union, it sounds beautiful, it sounds powerful, and it sounds foreign to a lot of people. It sounds this thing like, we don't know if this is like another twin flame story or another something like that, that it's a little bit fluffy and a little bit woo-woo, and we don't know how it really looks and how it feels and what it is to be in sacred union. So I'd love to start there. When you talk about sacred union, what are we talking about?
Well, I think every couple gets to define it for themselves in terms of what their intentions around sacred union are. But the way I just think about humanity is that the purpose that we all have on the planet is to evolve our consciousness, to evolve our soul, to grow more into love and less out of fear, more into unity consciousness and less in separation. And so if that's the entelechy of the soul, then what's the purpose or entelechy of relationship? And from our perspective, the entelechy of relationship is to evolve the soul, to really grow in consciousness. And we all have different kinds of relationships. I talk about the 5 different kinds of relationships, and think all of us can think of relationships that weren't necessarily sacred union, but were still soulmate kind of relationships in the sense that they awakened certain parts of us, or they triggered certain parts of us, or they brought certain wounds that we needed to look at and heal into our conscious awareness. And it's often the most excruciating relationships that do that. When we choose to be in sacred union, we're choosing to use the container of the relationships to evolve our souls, to grow in consciousness, and to get closer to God. To use the container of the relationship, everything from the emotional connection to the physical, sexual connection, to just daily life, to get closer to God. And to me, that means not a religious thing. It just means, again, I'm evolving my consciousness. I'm remembering that I'm whole, that I'm worthy, that I'm loved. And this container becomes less about, where we travel and how many kids we have and how much money we're making. All that is fine and great and can be an expression of each of us and of the relationship. But the primary intention of the relationship is to go deep enough with one person that you bust through places that you couldn't have gotten to on your own. We can only go so far on our own. It often takes a mirror to really ignite those places inside that take us to another level. Both a mirror interpersonally in terms of our issues and that mirror sexually. Because if you study any kind of tantra, you know that tantric, that kundalini awakening is that sexual awakening. And yes, we can get there on our own, but when we have another person that we can do that dance with and play with, it opens that in a whole different way. Anything?
The only thing that I would add to that, it's a really powerful depiction and like an experiential depiction almost, is I would add that in sacred union, the couple is very cognizant and aware of, or that relationship is very cognizant and aware of what value that relationship adds to the world. And so, a question that may be asked is, what value am I adding to your life? What value are you adding to my life, as a result of being together? And how is our coupledom, or how is our union adding value to our immediate and distant environment? The people that are in it, our friends, our family, the people that we impact, the people that we serve, the people that we communicate with, the earth as a whole. And it's a deeper consideration of all these other stakeholders that are part of our lives, directly and indirectly. And that, for me, it's that part of that definition that moves us into this sacred union, because the contemplation is beyond just the individual or even the couple, but it's again into this unity consciousness where we're really thinking about and feeling into, how are we making a dent and a difference and impact in the world in a really healthy way that's evolving the state and the state of consciousness that we're in now.
Yeah, you both remain sovereign beings, obviously, yet the we, you become more powerful as a we than you ever could be individually. Again, you don't lose your identity, you don't lose your individuality, you don't lose your sovereignty. That's part of sacred union. Sacred union is not codependence. It's not that at all.
It's
in fact,
interdependence.
you really support each other's sovereignty and growth, but the alchemical mix of the two people together create something even more powerful, both as a couple and in the individual experience. I know, speaking for myself, I feel way more powerful as Christine alone, knowing I have the container of this relationship, like how this relationship contributes to me. When I'm in the world, Christine, I feel more powerful. And especially when we're in the world together, obviously that's a whole different medicine, but it adds to both the individual and the couple experience.
The interesting thing is, just from our own personal experience working with so many different people and couples as well, individuals and couples, and just my observations of relationships in the world, is that sacred union isn't anything that's really exclusive. It's available to all of us, and it's a choice ultimately, right? So many people are afraid to go to that place because of the sovereignty piece. They think, and they have this fear, it's often connected to childhood wounding or developmental trauma, that my sovereignty or my individuality is going to be taken away from me, because we live in such a society that's very individualistic, particularly the Western framework that we, socioeconomic framework we live in. We have this fear that, I'll be lost in the other person. And I definitely come from that. I definitely come from that place. And it's taken me many years deliberately looking at that and continuing to look at that, like continuing to look at how, my individuation is expressed in this relationship and also in the outside world with the various identities that I have, right? But I think that's a big stop that don't allow people to go and step into that choice of sacred union because of the fear of, I'm going to lose myself. And that's not what it's about. It's
or
not
lose my freedom.
It's not about codependence. It's not about enmeshment. It's not about unhealthy bonding patterns or behaviors.
Or sacrifice.
Definitely not. It's about co-creation.
I love that. And I want to come back to this in a moment, because that's a big piece that holds people back from really allowing themselves to go deeper into that. But there's so many things that you mentioned that I'm pinpointing. When you talk about this coming together and the power of that sacred union and what it can create for the world, or give to the world, I wonder how many people listening to this will think, well, does that mean that I have to work with my partner? Does that mean that I have to create a business together? Does that mean that everybody has to coach together or be healers together? Is that a component of sacred union, or how can this be expressed? The coming together to serve the world or to add to the world without necessarily being professionally in that relationship.
You absolutely do not have to be professionally intertwined to make the impact.
And for most people, you quote unquote shouldn't be.
Right.
Actually, it's not for everyone.
Let's use a tangible example. So let's look at, March 2020 till now. More and more people have been in the energy of fear. And even if you're not in the energy of fear and anxiety, you kind of just from the collective can pick up on that, because what people have been putting out into the collective swimming pool of energetic soup is a lot of fear, panic, anxiety from the news. It's all over. We can feel it. If we choose to tap into that, we can feel that vibration. So we're energetic beings, and we're always putting energy out into the universe. So imagine that there were, let's say, 1 billion sacred union couples that every day, just in their relationship, just in terms of how they move through the world, just in terms of how they treat a server at a restaurant, or board a plane together, or do grocery shopping and errands together, it's just, or have an argument at home. It's more in this vibration of love and growth. That's the energetic contribution that we're making to the soup. And if you think of couples now, because there's so much dysfunction in relationship, because we tend to pick our partners based on our wounding until we do the work and pick from our values and our vision. I mean, I think all of us can think of 1, 2, 4, or 5 partners that we were working out issues with mom and dad, and then we were working out issues with exes. We're like, oh my gosh, I'm dating the same person with a different face. Here's the emotionally available one again, or here's the uncertainty again, or here's the chaotic one again, or we have these patterns. And so much of the vibration that couples are putting out in the world isn't that high. So by being in a sacred union relationship, your impact, your contribution is contributing to the energetic soup with more love, more balance, more integration of those masculine, feminine poles. And then we bring it into, those who choose to have children, parenting in a sacred union relationship. That's going to raise a whole different type of children, a whole new generation of children. And if we actually want to create systemic change, it starts at home. It starts with how we're raised so much. So your contribution doesn't have to be writing a book together or teaching a seminar together. It is the dynamic that you're contributing both to the energetic soup of the collective consciousness and to your immediate family, whether it be, again, children you raise or just people you come into contact with.
If you want to change the world, you change your home. You change your home life.
Right.
And how we do conflict, how we argue, how we disagree, it really matters. And that's a part of being in a healthy or conscious relationship, a relationship that you value not only for the sake of yourself and the relationship, but for all of those that you have immediate impact with. And so the conflict piece is really important, because as we begin, and we've noticed this in our relationship, that the way we argue or disagree or do conflict is very, very different to how we've done it in the past. So different. I won't even speak for Christine, she can share herself, but for me, I'm far more receptive. I'm more calm. Yes, I'm impatient. Yes, I can be abrasive, all those things. That's been my background. I still have that pattern in me, but the difference is night and day between how I was and how I am, and my staying power, my ability to be persistent in the relationship, not because of stubbornness, but because I really want to explore, what's my contribution to this? And all of those agreements that you make in relationship, ideally more conscious, so they're deliberate agreements that are out in the open as opposed to unconscious agreements, they make a big difference to how that relationship is perceived by others and how you impact others, how you influence and inspire others. And so part of sacred union as well is, again, this isn't coming from an arrogant or an egoic place, is wanting to inspire other people to potentially, hey, if they're attracted to this type of life or this type of being, maybe you can do that too, giving people real examples. But again, it begins, using our example, it's here.
Yeah.
Everything's here. So when we argue, when we're in conflict, when we're in intensity, how we recover from that, how we repair from that, how we choose to be in that, how we choose to not project in that, that really matters, because all of that, just like when every time you say something to a partner or to a friend that is hurtful, that's a scar. And the more you do that, the deeper that scar becomes, and it's difficult to come back from that. It's similarly, the more we repair, or the more we have an opportunity to be rude or project or be angry at each other in a disrespectful way, and we don't, that's not building scar tissue now. That's building like credits in the bank, right? Like it's money in the bank, so to speak. It's savings. And that matters. It matters a lot in relationship and intimacy.
Just to give a real tangible example, we had not an argument this morning, but we were just kind of in a discussion. And you might call it a tense discussion. It's something that we're working through. But we ended it. We didn't end it. It's just, there was just a lot of love and a lot of hearing each other and respecting each other. And 3 years ago, that could have turned into like brother, sister kind of yelling at each other.
Because we went through that as well, just to be clear.
In the beginning.
And not everyone will, but we that was part of our path where we went through that, almost like sibling arguing.
Yeah. And we've had 5 or 6 different people in our house today. Between clients, we have some construction going on. Like, we've had people in our home and in our space today. And even if they weren't consciously aware, if we were in a bad place, if we had had a nasty argument, if we were holding grudges, we were kind of in our shit, and then had all these people come into our space, they would have felt it somehow, even if they weren't consciously aware, right? So because they're walking into this environment we created. And because we hold a high vibration and a real connection of love, when people come into our space, they feel seen, they feel relaxed, they feel like, we notice when we have, like, for example, these construction workers say they feel comfortable with us. And if we had this tension, it wouldn't be like that. And so again, I think when people hear the word impact, they think millions of people and write a book and life-changing course. And that's all fine and good. But impact, we cannot minimize the impact we make on one person. And just creating a kind of safe space for people where they feel like they're not walking on eggshells on some level, where they feel just at home, where they feel comfortable. And that sacred union can really provide a feeling of home for people. Even if they're not aware of it, because, you've got one person kind of rooted in the feminine, one person rooted in the masculine. No matter what your gender, you've got that rootedness and that love and that connection that just, again, creates this container. So the impact doesn't have to be massive, but it can be massively impactful on a smaller amount of people.
Yeah. And I'd love to hear more about how you went from that type of relationship at the start, that tension, to learning how to really repair in this way, because I know this is a big thing for a lot of people. I know it's been a big thing in my relationship. Definitely gotten so much better, but there's been this oftentimes this feeling of just not knowing how to do it. We don't get taught how to repair. We don't get taught how to shift the ways in which we argue or communicate. And I feel like eventually, if you're committed enough and you're in a relationship long enough, you learn. You just learn from experience, right? Or that has been my experience anyway. But there's a lot of different things when it comes to repairing and really stopping arguments before they get, like you were saying, nasty and unnecessarily maybe dramatic, that I feel a lot of us don't have the tools to, because we don't get taught them. So how did you start learning to create this space for repairing, and what supported you?
Well, the first thing is taking responsibility for ourselves. So I had to take responsibility for my actions. I noticed myself a lot, and in all, I don't want to say fairness, but in honesty to the situation, we had met and a number of months had passed, and then in that space, I had chosen to partake in some pretty deep explorative, psycho-emotional, spiritual explorative work, which really brought up a lot of stuff in me. Now, prior to that, I'd done a lot of internal work, and I also had a very strong intuition that this particular piece, the sexual somatic piece, was sexual psychosomatic piece, was going to be a real big piece to my puzzle.
And he'd moved countries.
Yeah.
And we had gotten legally married after 3 months of knowing each other.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of change.
Yeah, and my organism physiologically was missing home. You know, even though I was traveling a lot, and I've been traveling since a very young age. As a I don't know, FYI, or as a nugget of information, I've been to like nearly 80 countries. So travel wasn't foreign to me. Always, but always
Then
had
you
that
were
home
stuck
base.
in the
Yeah,
US.
I was stuck because of circumstances that we had chosen to be in. So there's just a lot of compound effect. And so what I found myself doing was judging Christine and making her wrong. Testing and blaming her and you know, testing her. And to be very specific, it's like, well, I'm going to test you to see if you remain with me, or if you love me enough to stay with me, or to, you know, to do the thing that makes me feel better. So I was giving all my power away. I really went into a personable expression that wasn't so much me, and I regressed. I psychologically regressed to a very young age, right? And that kept playing out. And it didn't really matter what Christine did. I mean, that's not completely true.
Really? I tried everything.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it really didn't matter what she did. I mean,
I had my end too.
Yeah, of course. But Christine did her best to be compassionate and non-judgmental, and you know, to be really clear. And she knows this. I've told you this before. She did an amazing job at that. Not that it's an occupation, but she really stepped into that. But it still wasn't enough, because I wasn't assuming the responsibility, because I was really just more and more addicted to my pain and my victimhood. So when you ask that question, I'm giving you an example of, if we don't take responsibility for whatever our 100% of our contribution is to any dynamic, to any situation, to any relationship, then very seldom does that relationship have an opportunity to grow in togetherness. It just doesn't. And so we had to reach a place where we both had to take responsibility. And I'll tell you, it was very close multiple times where we both said, we made a mistake here. This really isn't for us. But we persisted.
It's so sad to think if we had.
I was thinking about it earlier when we were talking. But we persisted.
I was getting sad just hearing it.
Oh my God, it would have been such a shame.
So here's something that's interesting, right? I mean, I don't know if this is about you, but for me, I'm really fucking stubborn. And my shadow expression of stubbornness is I just lock in and I fight. Like, I'm very rigid. I'm an aggressive personality pattern. I'm an enduring personality pattern. Like, I will fucking fight until I'm dead, whatever type of fighting it is, right? And so the stubbornness in this instance, that energetic, worked for me. Your pattern's a little different, whereas you sort of, you know, you're very good at just, okay, I'm going to go with this, and you did that. And so, I mean, I'm going to be really careful with my words here. I'm not saying that these shadow aspects of ourselves saved our relationship or allowed us to continue, but they did contribute to it. But we did morph those shadow aspects of self. We did do that, right?
I have a little codependent pattern. So I was what kind of kept me in was the wanting to fix and wanting to save. That was sort of my shadow part that was coming through. But at the same time, I felt like I was getting smothered. So I was in this like codependent enmeshment dance. And, you know, really one of the big learnings for me was to learn how to have boundaries and ask for what I needed. And like trust that he was going to find his way through, and trust that me trying to rescue him or fix it for him or coach him or anything like that was not my role.
It's good advice.
Trust that I really had to like have my boundaries. Because at one point he went to my best friend's house. He had only met her once at a dinner. He got on a train from San Diego to LA. She picked him up. He went and stayed at her house with her 2 dogs, 3 kids. They're living, and they have like a 3-bedroom small home. He slept on the couch for 10 days, and we didn't speak. Because I was like, I need some space. You need to figure shit out. And my friend was like, I'll take him. Like, I'll take him. And that really was a turning point for us, because it gave us some.
That in combination.
Yeah, of course, of all the work that you did and everything.
Like coming to the tail end of that.
Yes.
Oh, that was finished.
That was the tail end, yeah.
Yeah. I finished the deep work,
right?
And it was just integration.
Right, but we needed a reset. And sometimes couples need that. Not a reset in terms of like, let's go explore with other people, and not that kind of reset, but a really clear, let's take some space without communication, find our own support system, and like work through our stuff and have an agreed upon time when we're going to come together. Because a lot of times in those times where stuff is coming up, there will be someone who has more of the anxious attachment style that just wants to fix it. There'll be someone who has more the avoidant that just wants to get out, or the disorganized, just is up and down and up and down. And a lot of times it's like a snow globe, you can't see clearly unless you set it down and let things just settle for a while. So we don't encourage frequent separation, but if you kind of get to a point where it's make it or break it before making a emotionally based decision, sometimes taking that dedicated space apart, that's intentional, right? I was traveling for work and things like that, but I was talking to my coach, I was journaling, I was working on my stuff, not a distraction kind of, we're going to take 10 days apart and I'm going to go out with friends and party every night, like a really intentional time, and then come back together, because you often need the snow globe just to settle for a little bit to be able to see and communicate clearly.
Yeah, and something that I think your listeners could also take from that, and that I'm taking now as I'm thinking about it, is the trust piece that you mentioned. And so, and again, this can very much link to back to sacred union, because when we're talking about sacred union, we are talking about a maturity in the relationship, right? And it's not a comparison thing or a hierarchy, or like sacred union couples, if they consider themselves out there, they're better than anyone else. It has nothing to do with that. There's a maturity in relating that takes place. And so in order for that maturity in relating to take place, one must trust themselves. And so, we were very new together. So when we took that time apart, very deliberately knowing there was a possibility that I knew Christine, but I didn't really know Christine.
Even though we were married.
Likewise,
yeah.
And then still now, I'm getting to know Christine more and more as every day passes. I just a side note, I think if you think you know your partner, then that can be an issue in relationship. We're constantly learning more about each other and about ourselves through each other. That's also part of sacred union, right? It's just a mindset shift. It's the perception shift. And so I had to surrender. I know Christine did too, but I'll just speak from my experience, because I had that so viscerally. I really had to surrender and say, you know what? This could be over. I've got to be okay with that. I've got to be okay with all the possible realistic scenarios and surrender to that, and trust that if I'm doing my work, if I'm a seeker of truth, and I'm willing to also do my inner work and take responsibility for myself, I'm going to come back to that very simple point of taking responsibility for myself. And I can be in forgiveness of myself and my actions and Christine and all those things. And I can just let it go. And then whatever happens, I trust that. Like I really, really trust and surrender to that. That's where that maturity can grow. And I know that Christine felt that genuine surrender from me.
Yes.
Which changed and shifted the energetic that I was coming from. I was no longer then coming from that needy little boy. I wasn't coming from that hurt little boy, that wounded little boy that was neglected and abandoned, right? I started coming from my own sovereignty again. I was reclaiming my own power. And she felt that from hundreds or thousands of miles away from when we were from each other. We weren't communicating in that space, and we had to really surrender to trust. And that's part of being in sacred union is trusting yourself and trusting yourself enough that if you're deliberate and you do your part and you do your work, that's enough. Now, if you sit back and do nothing, that's a different conversation, but that to me isn't sacred union either if you're not proactive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. I'd love hearing also in the tangible, specific ways how this plays out for each relationship, because oftentimes when we hear sacred union, like I was saying at the start, we can think of this ethereal thing and this really unattainable thing. But to hear the challenges and the tests that people that are in relationships like you guys go through is really refreshing, and it makes it more tangible and more specific. Also, when we talk about repairing, I've heard you speak before about relationship agreements and different, I wouldn't call them rules, but agreements and things that are set within the relationship on how you relate and do not relate, that I imagine support this repairing and this trust as well, that you can go through anything and everything together because there is a container, there is a structure that is supporting the emotional turmoil that at times occurs in relationships. So could you speak a little bit more on that, the agreements, how to create them, what they provide for, what yours are, if you feel to share?
Yeah.
So there's sort of a relationship contract, and then we actually have argument agreements, like things that we agree to do or not do in an argument. So, every year on our anniversary, we have a process that we go through in terms of and what we learned from the last year, intentions we want from this year. So we have a lot of rituals in our relationship that really, really help with the foundation of it. But in terms of our relationship contract, when we got together, we were really, really super clear about the kind of relationship that we wanted, and the kind of things that we would tolerate in a relationship and not tolerate in a relationship. And one of the things that we teach in our relationship retreat, which is a virtual program, people can do it anytime, is to make your relationship contract and to have a mission statement for your relationship. I mean, every business, well, not every, but most businesses, especially businesses that care about culture, have a mission statement and have their set of values. And that's the compass. And that's where decisions are made from. It's like, does this align with our mission? If we did this, are we staying in alignment with our values? And so we encourage every couple to come up with their mission statement and their values. And just that alone can be your relationship contract. You can think of different agreements that you have within that in terms of, money, in terms of how you want to raise kids, in terms of family boundaries, in terms of where you want to live, in terms of monogamy or not. All those kinds of things can be agreements that you write down. But without having a mission statement and the values in the relationships, how do you really make decisions about, does this fit into the ethos of our relationship? So we definitely suggest that. And we love having argument agreements. So arguments tend to repeat over and over and over again. And we see it with couples, and I'm sure those of you listening in a relationship can think of the same argument you seem to have over and over and over again. And it might have different variety, but it's basically about the same thing. And so often, not only are we arguing about the same thing, but we have bad habits in the relationship. So one of the habits that we would get into is Steph would get really big and scary. I never felt like my safety was threatened, but he can get loud and he can get big and he can use nasty words and he can hit the wall and he can storm out of the room. And I then go in the closet and cry, hopefully loud enough that he hears me and feels guilty, and then comes and wants to get me out of the closet. So that was one of our patterns. So he would explode, I would shut down. That was sort of the pattern. Not sort of, it was the pattern, you say, in so many ways. So that's one of our agreements, is that he agrees not to hit something. I mean, he's never ever hit me or damaged anything, but not to the air is fine, but just the loud sounds, the really loud screaming. My little girl has a huge trigger to that. I immediately not feel safe. I go into fight or flight. And when we're trying to have an argument, when the amygdala is firing, good luck. You're just going to go into your, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn patterns. So I go into freeze pattern when that happens. So that's one of the agreements that he's made. And one of the agreements that I made is just not going into shutdown victim, which is basically what I was doing. I was trying to protect myself by shutting down, withdrawing, crying, subconsciously trying to make him feel guilty and get love back, right? That was sort of my way of trying to get connection back. So one of the things that I've agreed to in argument is I speak up. I don't hold things inside, because what happens is when I hold things inside, then I just get resentful, irritable, bitchy, and judgy. He thinks I'm fine, but I'm thinking about something that happened 5 days ago because I didn't speak up. Mm. So that's one of them. One of the other things.
I don't think you're fine. I know you're not fine.
Yeah, that's true. You think it's fine, and then you take one look at my face and you're like, things are not fine. Fine, feelings inside not expressed. So I am fine. What are some of our other agreements that we make? That no one can storm out.
Yeah, we can't. We shouldn't leave in the middle of an argument, which we sometimes both do in different ways. Very rarely, but we still do that. And that's just wanting reprieve, right? Wanting to escape. And what we often do if that happens is we'll call it forward. Like, hey, we're in the middle of this, don't leave, or
I'll be back in 20 minutes.
Yeah, we're very clear.
An agreement about coming back together.
Yeah, or coming back later on this evening, depending on when the confrontation is taking place, and then discussing it later. But arranging a time for a loop to be closed on that conversation or on that conflict. And it may not be quote unquote sorted later, but the commitment to come back to it and the commitment to keep coming back to it until there's a resolution there, that feels good for both of us. Right? And that's healthy.
And the other agreement that we've made, and it's taken us a while to live into this one, but we're doing so much better, is that we're more committed to the relationship than to being right. So
that's a huge one.
It's huge. It's huge because when you're in an argument and you're really pissed off at your partner and you're hurt or you feel rejected or defensive or not heard, you just want to be fucking right and have your partner go, you're right, I'm wrong, I'm sorry. And often no one's right and no one's wrong. It's just two people that are triggered and both people are right and both people are wrong. So like really owning, and when Steph says something about me or to me that I may want to get defensive about, really breathing it in and going, okay, I hear that. And looking at, again, am I choosing growth? Am I going to like really live into sacred union and let this mirror show me some of my blind spots? Or is my ego going to protect me? Am I going to withdraw back into that hyper individuality and fight more for my personality than I am for sacred union? And so it's eating some humble pie and being willing to go, okay. And I really have to acknowledge my husband for this because he is really good at, he's often the first to like de-escalate things because he knows that if he de-escalates and I feel safe, it's that invitation for the feminine to drop our defenses, right? So he is just really, really, really good at owning his stuff and taking responsibility. Again, not in a pushover way. He's really like clear and firm in who he is. But when he can take that responsibility, like my nervous system relaxes. I'm like, okay, I was an asshole. I'm really sorry. You know, I was really controlling them, or like, you're right, I totally did that. But often, again, because he really holds the masculine pole in our relationship and I hold more of the feminine, of course, we dance in between them. But that, you know, especially for those people who polarity is important, it's really amazing when the man can really lead the ownership, because again, man's biggest fear in relationship and the thing he avoids the most is shame and judgment. Women's is fear and feeling unsafe. So it's like, as soon as he can make me feel safe, I can then open my heart and own my end and not throw little digs to shame him or judge him. So that taking responsibility is a huge agreement that we've made, and it's really changed how we argue.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, it's a big one. Even when I have found in my personal experience, even when you get you're right, that doesn't feel good when it's at the expense of the connection. Even when at times you're winning, quote unquote, winning the argument, if it's costing the connection, if it's costing the intimacy, it doesn't feel right. So we think that we want to be right, but in reality, when we drop the defenses, we just want to be connecting. We want to be intimate. So another question came up as you were sharing, because I know that a lot of people have this wound around feeling controlled and feeling like you don't tell me what to do. So I wondered, how did you create these agreements in a way that it didn't feel like nobody felt controlled or like they were being told what they can and cannot do, and they didn't feel like rules and things that you're not allowed to do? Maybe this wasn't an issue in your relationship, but I know in so many relationships, there's usually a person that has more of a tendency of feeling such an aversion and resistance to any form of control, any form of being told what to do. And I think this is just us by nature, humans. We don't want to be told what to do. We want to honor our sovereignty. But I know there's a lot of people that have a deeper wound when it comes to that, and they can be quite sensitive to feeling controlled and feeling like they're being restrained. And like you were saying before, Steph, needing to move past this idea that they can lose their sovereignty in the relationship, that they can lose their freedom, and in this case, the freedom to choose what I can and cannot do in every moment. So how did you create these agreements in a way that felt really expansive and really free for both of you?
Yeah, I mean, we took a number of different steps, but initially it was a struggle. It was a dance, and it was getting to know each other's boundaries and each other's edges and each other's pain points and histories and all of that. But ultimately, it came down to curiosity and just effective query. That's really what it is. Instead of assuming, it was, okay, well, what are you feeling? Where's that coming from?
What do you need?
What do you need? what could I do differently? Is this something that you've experienced before? Because the moment I understand that it's something that Christine has experienced before, the moment I take it less personally. If I'm taking it less personally, my ego is not so threatened. And so all of a sudden now I'm not on the defensive, or I'm not attacking. I'm not in this protective posture, because that's being diffused now, because I'm realizing at an intellectual level, but also at an emotional and a neurological level, that, oh, this isn't completely me. This isn't a blame. Oh, it's Christine's fault, or it's my fault. This is something that's existed in her field of reality before me. I can relax a little bit and let's work with this now. Now I can get more. It opens the door to curiosity. Now, when I'm getting curious, she's feeling less threatened, because I'm not making assumptions and being directly abusive, or I'm not being directly antagonistic. I'm not making it all about me and my needs. I'm curious about what she needs, and vice versa, obviously.
Mm-hmm. And I think in terms of the controlling piece, again, this is part of sacred union. Did you choose to be in a relationship because you want to continue to fight for your independence and your individuality? Or do you want to discover who you are in sacred union?
Through the other and through each
right.
other.
And still be sovereign, of course. But when we're fighting for control and we're fighting for our position, we're fighting for the way we've been. We're fighting for our protective patterns. We're fighting for our sense of like safety and familiarity. And there's no growth in that. So, I was single for quite a long time before I met Steph. And I really felt like I got as far as I could on my own in terms of personal development work and really discovering. And I was just kind of bored. I was like, what other rock do I need to look under? Like, where's my triggers? And so for me, a big thing has been remembering the purpose and the intention of sacred union, of like, okay, I chose this because I want to grow. I chose this because I want to evolve. And if I am fighting for my position and blaming it on, well, I don't want to be controlled, then I'm backtracking. I'm really not getting anywhere. And so I always keep that in mind, as much as like, there can be moments where I'm just like, he's so wrong. I'm so right about this. It's like, well, maybe he's not, and maybe there's something for me to see here. And sometimes he is, and that's okay too. But again, it's not about control. The argument agreements and relationship agreements are not to control each other. They're really to empower each other and to keep the container of the relationship a really safe space to thrive, because we all are little kids inside as well. And if there isn't certain structure and agreements in place, then our inner child's going to act up. Just like kids, when they don't have good boundaries and structure, they're train wrecks. They need that. And so we need that to hold the container of the relationship so that we feel safe enough to really grow.
That's a really powerful distinction, because I know that when it comes to agreements, when it comes to this, it can feel like a little bit of rules, right? But having this distinction between, it's not about controlling, it's about really supporting each other's growth and creating the container for safety. It's really powerful. And as you were sharing, I said at the start of this episode, I know that some people may think of sacred union as this twin flame thing where there's like one person in the whole world and you have to meet that soul and that's your person. And I'm hearing that perhaps this is something that we can cultivate, right? That we can actually choose to be with the person that we love. But I'd love to hear from you. Do you think that sacred union is about finding this one person in the world that you will be with? Or is it something that can be cultivated in a relationship of any kind?
Can you rephrase the question?
I can start. So yes, I think it can be cultivated under one very, very strong condition, which is both people have to totally be willing. So we see frequently, that there's a couple will come to us and one person will be so into growth, so into consciousness, so doing their inner wounding work, and they're yearning for the sacred union, and they feel like they're dragging their partner along, and the partner isn't super excited about it and super willing to do the same kind of work. That makes sacred union a little more difficult. You can still have a relationship and you can choose, okay, this person isn't the person that I'm going to necessarily go super deep with, or I'm going to explore consciousness with, or, I might have to get that from soul family and my spiritual practice and other things. You can still have a fine relationship, a nice relationship, a fulfilling relationship on several levels. But again, the way we would define and experience sacred union, it really does take two willing people. Is there this magical one person out there? I don't think it's every person. I don't think you can make it work with anyone. I do think there's certain people we're destined to meet. And, the way Steph and I came together, we were definitely destined to meet. We literally lived on opposite sides of the planet, and had one person in common that we knew of. So it was just crazy the way we came together. So I do believe that we have divine appointments with people, but I don't necessarily think that there's this one person. If you're not with that person now, you can't evolve your relationship into sacred union. If both of you are willing and you're both committed, then absolutely you can evolve your relationship into sacred union.
Yeah.
You agree?
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah. It's a lot of pressure to think there's only one person that you have to find.
I think there's too much that we know and that we don't know that will have us believe or have us see that sacred union can't be with anyone and everyone. However, if you're open enough to being in your life fully, then, and you're willing, that's the biggest thing for me, you're willing, and your partner or the person that you're with is willing, then you give it every chance to have a healthy, conscious, mature, evolved relationship, one that can help you grow, help them grow, and help those around you grow.
Yeah. And for people that aren't in relationship, that want to call this in, that want to become the person or be the space to be able to attract in their next relationship somebody that is a fit for sacred union, somebody that can really walk in life in this way with them, what are some of the things that we get to do? I mean, I'm in relationship personally, but what are some of the things that we get to do in order to prepare ourselves to be, call it fit, vibrational match, really in resonance with sacred union, so that we can call in that type of person?
Yeah, well, we have a whole course on this called Be the Queen, because we get this question so many times, because a lot of people that followed my journey of being divorced and being single for nearly a decade and then meeting Steph and falling into sacred union very, very quickly are like, how did you do that? And so because I got that question over and over again, I'm like, well, it's not really a simple answer. So we have a 3-month program about that we can talk more about later. But the shortest answer is you have to be what you're looking for. You have to. You can't wait. There's so much romantic idealism, and there's so much of our inner child that's waiting for someone to come and give us what we never got as children. And we have to fulfill that on our own. We have to find the inner parent inside ourselves. We need to find our spiritual connection, whatever that is. We need to be willing to go to our shadow, to go to our wounds, to go to our kind of deepest, darkest, and see that and know it and process it, so that we're not coming into the relationship with, tons and tons of baggage. A couple carry-on pieces, fine. We all have that, but we want to clean out as much as we possibly can. But the biggest thing, and to super simplify it, is you have to be what you're looking for. You have to be that partner to yourself. If you are a shithead to yourself and your inner critic is constantly firing and you're never good enough for yourself, that's your partnership. That's the partnership. That's the vibration, the frequency of partnership you're in right now. So you've got to start enjoying yourself and being kind to yourself and enjoying being in your body and pleasure and connection, and just really fall in love with you. Not from a self-love, I drink my green smoothie and say my affirmations every day, but in a real relational way. Because people are good at self-love practices and self-love, self-care practices. But where I see people really slip up is in their relationship with themselves, the way that they talk to themselves, the way that they relate to themselves in the world, the way they see themselves in the world. Think about your relationship with yourself. And you may have moments where you're really good to yourself, But is that sacred union? You know, if I only had, if I only had moments where I was good to Steph, we wouldn't be sitting here, you know? So it is that embodiment of what you're looking to attract.
Yeah. And with that, I know that as a recovering perfectionist myself, I attract a lot of clients that have this pattern of perfectionism and overachieving. And I see this shows up for a lot of my clients where, I mean, I wouldn't say the majority, but it happens often that my clients will go through this experience of not knowing whether the relationship is the relationship and being confused around whether it is their perfectionism, looking for everything that's yet not perfect and trying to pick it apart, or whether it is that the relationship is just not quite the relationship. Again, it's a lot of pressure to think that there is one relationship and that is it. And if you screw that up, then good luck, you're going to be alone for the rest of your life. However, I see this pattern of people questioning, well, is this the relationship that I can grow into sacred union with or in, or is this just not the one? And not knowing whether it is coming from a space of perfectionism because I've done the work and I've prepared myself and I was feeling so good before the relationship. And when the relationship comes in, then I find all of these little things. And I don't know if it's coming from a space of perfectionism or just and wanting to run away from the relationship, or because the relationship isn't quite right. What would you say about that? I know this is a question that comes up a lot, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
I would say two things. I'm going to come back to what I mentioned earlier around self-reliance and self-responsibility. So taking responsibility for what your internal processes are. And the second part to that, and this can be done simultaneously, is have that conversation with your partner. If you're in relationship to better each other, to help each other grow, you're in relationship to be each other's mirrors in different ways. Your partner doesn't have to be your therapist or your coach or your counselor. They can be your mirror. They can be your counsel. They can help you see something that maybe you can't see within yourself. You can ask them, hey, I'm pretty clear and I'm becoming clearer that this is the path that I want to go down in our relationship. Does this resonate with you, or does it still resonate with you? Is this of value to you? Does it have meaning to you? Are we on the same page? We often don't ask the question because we're scared of the answer. The answer may be different to what we have. And then all of our triggering and wounding and trauma comes up. I'm going to be alone. I'm going to be rejected. I'm not going to be loved. I'm never going to find anyone, and et cetera, whatever the story is, right? Ask the question. Get involved in the relationship. Be really direct, be truthful, be honest. I remember, I didn't read this, but I've heard people say this passage from Jesus Christ, you know, the truth shall set you free. There's something in that. There is a freedom in being truthful and honest. And there's, in fact, relationship research that tells us that if a man particularly, if he's honest, he engages in honest dialogue, he is truthful, he's earnest and vulnerable with who he is and what his needs are, that is so far more attractive than a man that is not that. And it works both ways, but it's a very attractive quality. And so if we're attracted to someone, we're now not repelling them, we're going to be more interested in wanting to delve into that area of the relationship.
Yeah, and I would say about the perfectionism, that's just a protective pattern. That's just the part of us that's scared. And so is looking for all the, you know, things that aren't right, or all like is in there and judging and picking it apart. You know, most perfectionists, they're perfectionists because it wasn't safe for them to just be who they are. And so a lot of perfectionism is projection, right? Well, it's not safe for me to be who I am. So I got to kind of pick apart who you are because I don't feel safe enough. So it's another way we subconsciously are testing. So for those people that are perfectionists, you know, here's what I know, especially speaking to the women, because I'm having the experience of being a woman in this lifetime. When you know, you just do. And it's that kind of initial, like when Steph and I started talking, I pretty much knew. And then when we met in person, I absolutely 100% knew. Did it mean I still didn't have times where I wanted to where I pushed him away, or where I was judging him a little bit, of course, but I had done enough work on myself to know, oh, wow, like you really feel something with this person. And so your critic is coming up, or your perfectionist is coming up, or your saboteur is coming up, and was able to recognize those. And we were able to talk about some of those things too, just the ways that we were finally getting what we wanted. We'd finally met someone that we felt seen with, we felt at home with. We're like, oh, wow, this really could be it. And that can be terrifying. The closer we get to what we actually want, oftentimes the more we test it and try to push it away and doubt it, because it can be so terrifying. Because again, it is the invitation into sacred union and into true intimacy and truly being seen. And that's risky. as romantic and as awesome as it sounds, it's risky. You know, when you Google sacred union images, it's like these two couples intertwined and lights shining out of their genitals in their head. And it's like this amazing thing. They don't show the two of us sitting on our couch, me crying, him like this, just in it, you know? And that's so much of the realness of what sacred union is. So we should do some pictures like that and see if we get Google to post it. Be like, this is what a sacred union really freaking looks like. But for the perfectionist or the pleaser or whatever that is, just know it's a protective pattern. And that's when you really got to get into your body and like trust your body on that one. And kind of go, is this a yes or this a no in my body? I got to get out of my head. And I don't mean like attraction wise. I mean intuitively wise. Like let your body reveal to you the truth and just be aware that that perfectionist pattern is the part of your brain that's looking for safety. It's not the part of your brain that's going to evaluate the relationship in the most healthy way.
Yeah, powerful. And I have found also writing down what exactly is that I want, because I have been in similar situations in the past where it's hasn't been easy. And, you know, I have the somatic tools, somatic embodiment. I do all those things. I know all those things to feel into my body. But when it comes to being deep in my shit, at times it hasn't been so easy to feel into, is this a yes, is this a not? Because codependency would get triggered and the perfectionism would get triggered, but also the fear of not being with the person. And what if I make the wrong decision and actually I'm meant to be with them? All of that would come up. So actually sticking to facts, it's something that in the past has helped me a lot when my head and my body weren't just not communicating as much or with as much clarity as I was feeling I needed to actually look at the facts. Am I feeling, like you were saying, seen? Am I feeling safe? Am I feeling, you know, is this person willing to do the work, to be in the way that I choose to be in relationship? So I know that you have a process, a sacred union process that I'd love to hear about. And then you mentioned a relationship retreat and Be the Queen program. So if you can share all of the things with us, all of the ways in which people can work with you, that would be awesome.
Sure. So the Sacred Union process is a free process. If you just go to christinehasser.com/sacred union, you can find it there. And we talk about what Sacred Union is. We explain the process. And then it's a 45-minute experiential process that we guide you through that you and your partner can do together. And if you haven't met your beloved or you're not with anyone, you can do the process with yourself. You can do it with a mirror and just do it with yourself, because we are our own beloved first and foremost. Right. So that's a beautiful offering. And like I said, that's free, christinehasser.com/sacred union. Our relationship retreat is one that we taught live a few months ago and recorded it so you can go through it at your own pace. And that's christinehasser.com/relationship retreat. And then the Be the Queen program, which we're going to start teaching again end of November, beginning of December. That's a 3-month program we teach live.
It'll be live for the last time.
Yeah, live for the last time for at least a year and a half. And we take, that's for women who are calling in men, because that was my experience. And so that's what we teach. But Steph teaches it with me, which is awesome, because women really get the experience of being able to ask a man anything.
Really, give you a lot of insights into the male.
Yeah, lots. We have a lot of really juicy conversations. We talk about everything from father wound to exes to fertility to sex, sexuality to dating to, you know, one of the things is I got really frustrated with all the bad dating advice there is out there. So we make dating a lot more enjoyable. And you might think, but I've done all this work before. And, you know, we hear that from a lot of the queens going through the program. And I was like that too, when I was like, I've done all this work. Why is there more work? However, the way we facilitate it, the exercises we do, and the container of the other women and the space we hold for you as sort of the conscious couple, right, that you're calling in. And that's one of the things I did, is I started hanging out with conscious couples in sacred union when I was still single.
Well, hold on, just side note on that. Like, where did we meet?
Yeah, so we met. Well,
where did we physically meet?
The first time we met physically.
What were you on?
I was on a couples trip that I had agreed to 6 months prior. 6 couples were going, and my friend Chris was like, "Come!" And I'm like, "I'm single." He's like, "Who cares?" I was like, "You're right. I want to be around really couples that are traveling the world and doing really cool things and masterminding. So I'll just come single." But then we met a few months later, and I invited him on this trip with me, never having met him before. And that was like our first date, was this couples trip. So yeah, so the Be the Queen kind of covers all the bases, from the cleanup to the dating, to really being a great partner to yourself, to also having a community. Because the other thing that I experienced as a single woman is I had few people I could talk to about, either because my friends were married or in relationship, or because a lot of my single friends were kind of on the I hate dating, men suck bandwagon. And I didn't want those kind of conversations in my field, right? Like, I wanted to be positive about it. I didn't want to like trade bad dating stories over and over again. So that's the other thing, is you really feel this amazing sisterhood, because it can feel, at least in my experience, it can feel really lonely when you're single, if you're wanting and longing for a relationship. And one of the reasons we're teaching it over the holidays is because that was one of the hardest times for me, was that period of time, like Thanksgiving into Valentine's Day. Like, as soon as I saw the Christmas decorations come out, I was like, can I just fast forward to February 15th? Because the next 3 months are just my worst ever. So that's another reason we teach it at that time. And that's christinehasser.com/bethequeen.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'm going to put all of the links in the show notes, so you can just go there and find all of those as well. And last question, in your opinion, what makes a leader sacred?
I've been speaking a lot about this the last couple of weeks in much of the men's work that I've been doing. And there are, let me be very clear, there are various components that make a leader sacred. But for me, what's really prevalent and prominent for me right now is a leader's ability to be led.
I was going to say the same thing. You took me.
Love it.
You're cute.
You have to come up with something else.
As a mouse. So to expand on that just slightly, is there are leaders that lead leaders, and there are leaders that lead followers. And there is a distinction between the two. And leaders that lead leaders and carry a capacity to simultaneously be led carry great value, and for me really equates to sacred leadership.
And I'll just expand on that by saying, keep continuing to do your own sacred work.
Yeah.
By allowing yourself to be led, continue to be led by your coaches, your teachers, your spiritual practice. Like, continue to put yourself in situations where you aren't the smartest one in the room, where you aren't the one who's leading, where you really are the student. Because that, keeping ourselves humble and keeping ourselves a student and always learning, always growing, to me is incredibly sacred.
Yes, absolutely. I second all of that. Thank you. Like, I could be talking to you for 10 hours and still have more questions, but I'm conscious of your time. So thank you again. Thank you so much for the work that you do, for everything that you do for the collective. As you know, I follow your work. I now can say I've been a student of your work. I couldn't say that the last time I had you in the podcast, but now I can say that. And it's been amazing to see you both, and just the mastery and the devotion that you bring to the work. So thank you. And thank you again for your time and all the wisdom that you shared on this episode.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this video and got lots of value from it. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for many more value-packed free videos, and share this with anyone in your life who can also get value from it. If you want to get access to all of my free resources and connect, check out the links in the caption. Thank you again, and I will see you on the next video. I hope you enjoyed this video and got lots of value from it. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for many more value-packed free videos, and share this with anyone in your life who can also get value from it. If you want to get access to all of my free resources and connect, check out the links in the caption. Thank you again, and I will see you on the next video.